The radar reports multiple unidentified objects heading our way. This doesn't look good.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no!
Up until the recording of this video, I'd honestly never played this game, much less even seen any footage of it. I've been meaning to always get around to it though. Ever since I was remastering all the Sega CD artwork, I had to do quite a bit of work to retrofit the cover art to the standard long box format. The whole session really brought forth a curiosity for this title that just took 4 years to finally take advantage of. Developed by Micronet and localized to the States by BigNet USA, Blackhole Assault is one of the several launch titles that accompanied the Sega CD when it came to American shores in 1992. Judging by the artwork on the front, I was assuming this would be a mech warrior type game, only realized it's actually a fighting game. Unlike most fighting games though, each bout is simply one round, so you have only one opportunity to win against your opponent. As far as the main story goes, you have only 2 characters to choose from, and regardless of who you choose, the difficulty spike is severe about halfway through. It was so severe in fact, that I opted to use cheat codes so I could see all that this game offered. Now as an aside, I'm in no way trying to highlight my own abilities in this series, instead wanting to display the games themselves. So if you miss that old cheap feeling of being completely owned by Katana on Mortal Kombat 2 at the arcades, this game will bring that wonderful feeling of defeat back in spades. The last few opponents I felt were savagely impossible, based on the playstyle you are forced into by the game. So the game is a little different in how the playstyle is. You can basically do punch, kick, throw, and a special move. Punch and kick are very risky, as you have to be punching and kicking distance from your opponent, which can open up to devastatingly brutal attacks from later enemies. Throw attacks usually take off much more health, but some enemies are impervious to this as they are crouched down, so the grab animation doesn't register as they are out of range. Some enemies I had to play an odd game of chicken to try to outsmart the AI to allow an opening for an attack. It was a very slow and methodical approach, almost like a Randy Orton match or some such. The first few guys just got smoked by spamming the throw attack, but after that the AI wised up to this approach and that no longer worked, and very rarely was I able to pull off a special move that seemed like it actually connected to my opponent and worked out. By the end of the game though, the opponents become so frantic that it's just a miracle to survive, much less win, thus the cheat code implementation. Other than the typical one-on-one fighting, this game also includes 2 separate rather interesting tournament modes. Thanks to the Sega CD onboard RAM, you don't have to run through the full gauntlet in one sitting, but can instead prolong the full experience to multiple sessions. Extra beneficial if you and a friend have a tournament going and something comes up, you can easily continue another time. There's one version where it's just a typical bracket tournament, choose a guy, choose some opponents, and the winner of both brackets face off to determine the winner of the tournament. Simple enough. The other versions where you have like a chart, and you choose any square to face off who you want. This would have been an interesting concept to play out over summer break with a sibling, have like 1 match a day to determine the grandmaster of the game. It's a much longer tournament because if you have 8 fighters chosen, it's 64 matches in total. This would have been a concept that Boone and Tobias should have incorporated into Mortal Kombat 2. That would have been a killer tournament to set up at the arcades. Blackhole Assault was directed by Shaka, stated that this person also directed Heavy Nova, Konami's Junction for arcades in the Genesis, as well as offered technical support for AX101. After some brief research, I could not find anything at all on this individual, other than a list of work credits. And like most retro Japanese games, the credits are very obscure and less than ideal to expound upon, because almost all mentions are just simply a first and or last name. Who knows? Many industry insiders have been on the record to state that up until recently, publishers didn't see the necessity in even having in-game credits, because the devs were looked at as just grunts pounding code, and that viewpoint seems to have been even more pronounced in Japan and other eastern regions. The music was composed and arranged by Studio River Kids, Fandango Limited, and Shaka. The only credit I could find for Studio River was this game and Heavy Nova. But for Nova, they are credited as Studio River Kings. Fandango Limited also worked on Revengers of Vengeance, as well as the Third World War. And Shaka also handled sound design on Heavy Nova. The soundtrack isn't out of this world amazing, but does have a few decent selections. and since this is a Sega CD, of course the tracks are all Redbook audio that they are using, so there were some decent variety to the soundscape. And sound effects were all pretty crunchy for jumping and attacks. I felt like the effects were some of the better effects I've heard in a random one-off B-tier fighting game. It says the sound design was handled by Peter Scott of Soundcat. I initially wanted to assume he had a great deal to do with the sound effects, but in reality, chances are actually more realistic that he assisted with the voice production for the voice acting. So other than that, I can only assume that the effects were implemented by the same team that ended up doing the music as well.
The C.A.M force has obliterated the enemy's frontline bases with missions on Venus, Mars, and its asteroid Phobos. Having successfully completed their missions, they now head to the outer space reaches of the solar system.
Of course, this can't be a Sega CD game without the FMV sequences. There's actually a decent story woven through, where between every 3 or 4 matches they use FMV sequences to tell. Earth's population has exploded, and the planet has run out of raw materials for construction. So several mining team scouts are sent to other planets to see if materials can be sought elsewhere. Our heroes find themselves on the outskirts of Saturn, where they are blindly attacked. The enemy has been popping off various encampments, getting ever so closer to Earth. It is your job now to take on the intergalactic fight against this alien force, wherever they are found, snuff them out before they reach Earth. The cutscenes are well animated, even though they are basically like most anime, as in a series of still photos of moving mouths and such. The graphics are serviceable enough and the colors are crisp and vibrant. The level design was rather cool in all the exotic places you fight, from a living forest, to a desolate moon, to fiery lava cave, and there was a nice variety in places to go and things to see. Some slight parallax scrolling was also displayed, although nothing extreme like what you would find in Donkey Kong Country or things like that. And as mentioned before, the cutscenes were nicely animated and colored, the video was very crisp and sharp, and the graphic quality was nicely displayed. So after playing this game for a solid 2-hour session for this recording, it's by far not the worst on the platform, and there are also better 2D fighters to check out, but the soundtrack is great, and the FMV story is interesting. At the very least, download the ISO so you can rip the soundtrack and call it a day. One thing we can say is Micronet had a general niche, and they did that very well for themselves. Their games were never bad, and they had very specific aesthetic to them that once you picked it up, you knew that you were playing a Micronet game, much like From Software or Midway or Digital Pictures. And if you're ever bored, you can always check out their website, which I'm pretty sure has literally never been updated since 1998.